Drafting a new set can be pretty difficult. There's a lot of information to absorb and new archetypes to look into, new removal spells, new creatures, and you pull that awesome rare and mythic, but you never seem to pull it out in the game. So now you have to rely on your commons and uncommons. Well, what are the best commons and uncommons for Kaldheim draft? I'm about to tell you right now. Greetings, fellow nerds. Welcome to another MTG NerdPhil video. Going back to my roots today, just a little more face-to-face time and just giving you the thoughts, my thoughts and analysis on some cards that have worked really well for me in Kaldheim draft. I haven't been able to draft in person, but luckily I do have Arena to help me out there. Before we get started, do me a favor, hit that subscribe, hit that like, hit that alarm bell, whatever helps you find me a little bit easier in the future so that you can get more videos like this. And every now and then I'll talk about other random stuff besides me playing on Arena or talking about the limited or occasionally even the commander environment. So again, hit those buttons, really help me out. And now let's get started with number 10. So at number 10, I put Starnheim Courser in the number 10 slot. I mean, by alone, this card is pretty good. Like, if it didn't have any, if it was just a vanilla, 3 mana 2/2 flyer, like, I would still put that in my deck just because, that's a relatively cheap flyer, and if you're going like blue-white flyers especially, that's a solid way to get in for some considerable amount of damage. But the fact that this card has like kind of pseudo ramp is pretty amazing, especially considering that there are some good enchantments, but more importantly that there are some good vehicles, and you're about to see a vehicle in this top 10 set, which is like kind of weird. I love to play vehicles in the limited environment because I do think they're generally pretty good, but there's one in particular that is pretty busted in my opinion. But again, just with all the vehicles that you get to play out for cheaper, I think Starnheim Courser is just a really good threat to all around the board. And, if you see a Starnheim Courser, you should probably remove it pretty quickly unless you think that they're going to play into even much bigger flyers or just a really big creature. So at number 9, I have the Vengeful Reaper. That's right, I put another flyer on here. Flyers are pretty good in limited, just in case you didn't know. If you're new to the limited environment, just try to, spread yourself with a good amount of flyers and you'll do fine. But Vengeful Reaper has 3 keywords, and they're relevant keywords: Flying, Death Touch, and Haste. I mean, Flying Death Touch alone is pretty good, but the fact that you get to swing in for 2 damage and then maybe hold this creature back as a blocker to make opponents attack really difficult is pretty good in my opinion. And the fact that it has Foretell to boot is also pretty awesome. So even if you don't have the 4 mana, you can kind of relatively keep a 3 mana hand, and you probably should for the most part anyway. Foretell this turn 2, and then turn 3, you can play it or play it for a much cheaper cost, of course, because that's how Foretell works. But again, Flying, Death Touch, Haste, just like those keywords are alone are pretty busted combination, and it just makes attacks really difficult, which means that the opponent has to use a removal spell on this card, which leaves way for your much bigger threats if you have any. But yeah, this card really solid. At number 8, I have Poison the Cup. I mean, removal spells are good and limited no matter what, but the fact that this has 2 upsides is pretty insane if you think about it. Instant speed removal, definitely a plus. Foretell it for a cheaper cost later on, definitely a plus. And then if you foretell the card, you scry 2. I mean, if you think about it, that's 3 potential upsides. And even if you don't, you get the foretell. I mean, just having a removal spell that is, removing your opponent's biggest threat is still pretty solid. Like, murder in limited is fine alone, but the fact that you're getting 2 additional upsides, that's pretty insane. So definitely if you're in black and you see this card, or you open this and it's pack 1, you may end up, and of course the rare mythic is not your color, probably definitely, I would say, definitely worth picking. At number 7, I put Horizon Seeker. Now, this card doesn't look that great. Its stats aren't necessarily the best. I mean, it's pretty good, but really it's for the boast ability. I think that if you can protect this creature or buff this creature and keep it around for 1 or 2 turns, and activate its boast ability, you're in really good shape. And the reason why this card is pretty good in my opinion is because it gets lands out of your deck, and that's really important, especially in a limited environment where at later portions of the game, you and your opponent are top decking. Like, usually turn, 6, or, more than turn 6, you're usually top decking, especially against an opponent who's playing those random discard spells every now and then. Filtering out lands and just drawing relevant cards, even if they're weak creatures, is pretty important. So that's why I really like Horizon Seeker. So they're usually what I'll do if I'm in green and I see Horizon Seeker, I'll get some combat tricks that buff a creature and kind of ensure that Horizon Seeker stays on the board for a little bit longer to make sure I can filter out lands out of my hand. And even if he dies during the process and you're like, oh, I didn't draw a land turn 4, you can use Horizon Seeker to kind of solve that problem. And him sacking himself, but him dying to the cause is pretty worth it in my opinion. And at number 6, we have the Demon Bolt. Now, I've used this card in Is It Giants in one of my previous videos. If you want to go ahead and check that out, go ahead and do so. So if I can use it in standard, you can bet your butt it's really good in limited. Now, I was debating about this between this and Frostbite, and while Frostbite is cheaper, the problem with Frostbite in a limited environment is that you're most likely never going to get the full utility unless you've been picking a bunch of snowlands, which it's kind of a mistake. You don't want to like spend too many turns. Like, you can maybe spend 3 or 4 turns picking snowlands, but I wouldn't really advise more than that because you want to be picking relevant cards. So Demon Bolt is just a little bit safer all around, and the fact that you can foretell this card for 1 mana later on is really good. 4 damage will usually hit most things in the limited environment, or at least you can do a 2-for-1 if need be. So that's why I put Demon Bolt pretty high on this list. And at number 5, we're at the midway point, I put Mammoth Growth. Now, this is kind of strange. I usually don't put combat tricks directly. Like, I prefer removal spells over combat tricks for 99% of the time. But Mammoth Growth is that 1% that actually matters. +4/+4 for 3 mana is still something I would play as a combat trick. But the fact that you can foretell this makes this really difficult in the limited environment, especially with a bunch of cards being foretold in the limited environment. And you put up 1 green, your opponent has to think, oh my gosh, am I just gonna get traded over, especially if they don't block, and you're like, all right, I'll take 6, and then they're at 10, and then, oh look, I can foretell this for 1. You're dead. It's just incredibly one of the most powerful combat tricks I've ever seen in the limited environment. So I've had a lot of success, and I've ended a lot of games because of this, because they just don't consider that I'm going to be taking an additional 4 out of nowhere, which this card basically does. So yeah, I think this card really deserves a spot at the midway point. And at number 4, we have Saruf's Packmate. Now, this card alone is pretty good. 4 mana, 3/3 draws you a card. So it's a 3/3 that replaces itself. That's pretty solid. But again, Foretell makes all the difference. It means that you can, cast it turn 4 pretty comfortably and say, all right, I'm suffering. I'm, going through my deck, looking for the bomb or the rare that I pulled, or just a big butt that I drafted. So this helps me get a little bit faster. But the fact that you can foretell this as well, saving yourself mana in the future is really good. And also one of those cards that makes you consider like playing like those bounce effects or those graveyard recursion decks. I mean, I usually don't put those in my deck, but it's one of those cards that makes you think, well, it might be worth it for me to play some of those cards that let me fetch cards out of the graveyard because I like to draw again. And it's a body, so pretty solid all around. It's done me pretty good in green, so definitely deserves number 4 on my list. All right, we've hit our top 3. So these are cards I 100%, if you're in these colors, you probably should pick them up. They'll save/win you the game altogether. So number 3 is Iron Verdict. This card, I actually haven't been able to use it a whole lot. I haven't been able to go into white pretty comfortably in my drafts, which is weird because I usually just slam blue-white flyers as much as I can, but just for some reason the rares and cards being passed to me just don't allow me to. But Iron Verdict is a card I've frequently faced against, and it just wrecks me completely, and I assume that the opponent is gleefully happy when they destroy a Goldspan Dragon that I drafted. Which is actually great. I mean, that was a great feeling, but it wasn't great getting Iron Verdict, especially for 1 mana. Like, you foretell something for 2, could be anything, and then for 1 mana, for 1 white mana, I lost a Goldspan Dragon. Like, what? Like, that's insane. I mean, a lot of creatures don't have vigilance in this set either. There are a couple like gods, and there might be a aura or something I'm missing that allow vigilance, but this thing is gonna hit like 90%, probably 95% of whatever swinging at you. So it is just, holy moly, this is a removal spell if I've ever seen one, and something I would be happy to pick up in white any time of the day. All right, at number 2, I did say earlier that there was a vehicle, and this number 2 slot is a vehicle, and it's Raider Carve. I have no idea how to pronounce this. I apologize, but yeah, it's this long ship. It's incredibly useful. I mean, again, vehicles, I have fun with vehicles just because I think they're general upside. I treat them as creatures more than anything. And yes, while there's this weird thing of like they don't count as a creature, you know, they're more of an artifact. This card is just really good. Like crew 3 is not super hard to accomplish, especially when you're most likely playing a 4-drop to follow the Raiders card. um so usually after turn 3 you're pretty happy. I've actually crewed this with 3 like one tough creatures, and it's just worth it. But yeah, 4/4 attacking, pretty solid stats all around. And but the effect of looking at the top card and playing a land again, like I mentioned earlier with Horizon Seeker, getting through your lands as quickly as possible is very important. And this is like a better way than Horizon Seeker, of course, because it's a better attacker. The land comes into play tapped, and the part it doesn't matter that it's coming in tapped because again you're getting the lands out of your deck. So you could be ramping effectively in a certain sense, like not it's not like really ramp, but yeah, it is. Um, and it's just a really just powerful vehicle. It's done me a lot of good. And it's just yeah, I don't know. Like I have nothing but positive things to say about it. And again, since most people aren't running like artifact removal, they're usually using a creature removal spell on this, and generally that's okay because you might have bigger threats later on to play. So yeah, I mean, and it's colorless, so you know if you see it like you can maybe pass it on the first time, but I imagine the second or third rotation you probably want to pick it up if you see it because it'll definitely disappear after that. So definitely number 2 in my book. All right, finally we are at number 1. You probably know what it is. I'd be pretty surprised if you well, I won't say surprised. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in the commons and uncommon slots, but number 1 is Feed the Serpent. I think a lot of people were a little surprised when this became a common quality because a few sets back in Ixalan, we've had this. There was a card called Vraska's Contempt that did the exact same thing, and you gain 2 life. So, you know, a lot of people went like, so is the gaining 2 life makes a difference between common and rare? And one of my friends actually had a discussion about this, and one of my friends brought up a really good point. This goes out to you, Bobby. He had said, you know, there's just actually a lot of cards ever since War of the Sparks came out, and there's just a bunch of planeswalkers, you know, floating all over the place, because they filled up the rare and even the uncommon slot, especially in the standard format. They had to print out other cards that had to deal with those. So, you know, we got cards like Murderous Rider, for example, pretty much a staple in black. Seen a little less play, but, you know, still considerable. And things that hit planeswalkers like Bone Crusher Giant, for example. And you know, cards like that you know that do damage to planeswalkers. So it's no so it kind of makes sense that this did get kind of, I guess, devolved into a common. But just in the limited environment, again, hits the biggest threat, exiles them, which could be relevant. There are some cards in limited that do work with the graveyard. Again, it's at instant speed, so it's just a for sure way to deal with the opponent, unless they're playing the snakeskin card, I believe it's called, that gives hexproof. Because there are some things that where it's like, you know, if this creature dies, return it back to the battlefield or give it indestructible. Whereas exile is, you know, you're 99% of the time going to be removing the threat permanently. You never have to worry about it again. So yeah, Feed the Serpent, definitely number 1. If you're in black, you see this, and you're likely to see this at some point because it's common, pick it up immediately. You'll be very happy to get rid of a Goldspan Dragon like mine at instant speed removal. All right, well, that is all I have for today. Those are my top 10 picks for the draft environment. Just really solid cards all around. I kind of strangely noticed that, like, I'm trying to recall now, I don't think I put any blue cards on here. Not to say that blue cards are bad, but it just seems like they're taking a little bit of a backseat. Of course, blue flyers are amazing, and there were some I've definitely considered putting on the top 10 list, but these are the cards that I've either consistently run into that have ruined my day, or that I've consistently played that have made my deck function extremely well. So let me know down in the comments below what other commons and uncommons that have been really successful for you. And let me know kind of what you think I should have put on this top 10 list, or maybe a card I should have taken out even. I mean, this was pretty hard. I mean, once it was, the top 5 were pretty obvious in my opinion, but once we got to 6 and down, it got a little tight. So let me know what you would put on this list, and let me know why. I'm very curious to hear opinions, and maybe I'll go undefeated in draft. Been close, but haven't been undefeated yet in Kaldheim draft, but been very close. So I just want to say thank you all so much for watching, for supporting this channel. It's been growing. Thank you all so much. Right now up top, next to me somewhere, YouTube is showing a video of my most recent upload. And then right below that is a video that YouTube thinks you specifically like. It says, hey, you're going to like this video. So go ahead, check those videos out, explore the channel. Again, hit those buttons down below. And I want to say thank you again so much. I'll see you for your next NerdPhil.